AKA Padders, welcome to episode 567 of AKA Pads. That's me, the Film Buff Podcast. Yes, we celebrate movies. We love movies. We are all about the movies. And here we go. We got maybe, some will say the greatest movie of all time. Now, what's on the list of the greatest movies of all time? Yeah, we got Titanic here. We're talking Titanic, but what else? What else is in the category of Titanic? Well, Citizen Kane, The Godfather. Some people might even say Star Wars or Jaws. But it really is, in my view, it's a two-horse race. It really is Titanic, and it really is Citizen Kane. Now, previously on this show, I said All That Jazz, Bobby Fosse, greatest movie of all time. That is what I view as filmmaking. For me, for my criteria, that is the greatest movie of all time. But this is there. I can watch All That Jazz, Citizen Kane, and this movie. Now, you Hitchcock fans might say Vertigo. Put Vertigo in there too. And actually put in Jaws, because Jaws blows me away every time I see it. And that's the same scenario with Titanic. Every single time. Back in the day, you had 2 VHS tapes for Titanic. Even then, even seeing it in the theater, I believe I saw it 4 times in the theater. Titanic fascinates me. It captures me. It pulls me in. And I watched this movie going over the ocean, because while I was in Europe, and thank you American Airlines, but while I was in Europe, we had all of this Titanic sub drama. It was fascinating. It was fun to follow that news story in Europe. Now, tragedy, right? Sad news that no one came out of that Ocean Gate sub, but it reignited why people love Titanic, why they're fascinated by it, why it captures their imagination, why to the very single idea of Titanic. When someone says Titanic, you get images, you get ideas. And James Cameron created a movie that perfectly taps into that curiosity and fascination. Now, he's a master storyteller. One of the best, right? Top 5, top 10 filmmaker of his style, of his genre. Call him a blockbuster filmmaker. Call him whatever. He is, or technical filmmaker. He is at the top of the list. It's hard not to put him towards the top. I would argue that he's above Steven Spielberg. He's not above Ridley Scott, but he is so high up there. He doesn't have the artistry of a Steven Soderbergh or an Ang Lee, but top 10 filmmakers get stacked relatively quick. In my view, he's so there. But I'm watching this movie, and I'm re-experiencing this movie on the flight. And then something does occur to me, and this is the big question. We all know about the heart of the ocean. We all know, and I'm not really giving you guys the plot. I'm just here to tell you about a personal experience while watching one of the greatest movies of all time. But the end of the movie, I love the end of Titanic. I love Rose throwing the heart of the ocean. I love the reveal. I love doing my own callback, my own memory when I first saw that. Every time I watch the movie, I am back in the theater watching this for the very first time. And when I was younger, there was so much press. There was so much coverage. There were so many specials on TV. You couldn't keep up with it all. But the rollout and the hype for this was there. And the movie delivered. The movie paid off. The movie gave you the reason to show up to the theater. Emerging Leonardo DiCaprio, what could have been, right? I think the real tragedy when it comes to the cast is Billy Zane. For some reason, that movie typecast him. It killed his career. I will say until Martin Scorsese, the same happened for Leo. But Leo went on to have a truly storied Hollywood career after Titanic. Not, was a child actor. He's had one he was like 10, 15 years in the game before Titanic even, started shooting. Yeah, so like the path of some of these careers, again, like as fascinating of the movie. Billy Zane for me always got the short end of the stick. I remember watching Titanic and saying, telling my sister, that's the guy from Back to the Future, and she's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, Back to the Future 2. What's wrong with you? He's one of the thugs. So, but I'm watching this movie, and Rose throws the heart of the ocean, the jewel, the plot, the thread throughout this movie, the bookend, we'll call it. She throws it into the ocean. And in a way, see, I always interpreted this as it represents Leo, right? It represents Jack. And she's shedding herself of this. She's finally moving on in her life before she herself passes on. And she's returning to a scene of tragedy to allow herself to be forgiven. And it's not that deep. It's very literal. But then, as I was watching the movie, I'm thinking of this. I'm thinking of everything I just told you. And I guess that's where lightning struck my brain, and I flat out confused myself. The heart of the ocean, I don't know understand how that can represent Jack. The heart of the ocean wasn't owned by Rose. There was no death because of the heart of the ocean. Billy Zane, her husband, was oddly obsessed with her and the heart of the ocean. He was obsessed with his family's fortune. His character, right, as we know from the narration, commits suicide when the stock market crashed. So what really does the heart of the ocean mean? Does it literally mean Jack's heart? Does it literally mean Rose's heart? Rose, it's almost like a blood diamond by the time she throws it over into the ocean. And that's now a deeper question for me. Now I need to restudy this movie and re-experience this movie. And that's a lot of the baseline. That's a lot of what the Film Buff podcast is all about. We see movies, we examine movies, we re-examine movies. That's what we do here, and I believe I'm on that trajectory now, because our next episode, 568, Transformers: Rise of the Beast. This movie now just dropped a night ago on Paramount Plus, and I've seen it 3 times. I stayed up all night until 3 o'clock in the morning for it to go live and become available to watch it. I was that excited. And I cannot figure that movie out at all. Now, I've done a YouTube video, a little bit about Michael Bay's box office for last night compared to Transformers: Rise of the Beast. But even before I speak to you about a movie, we're looking at film and we're studying film a certain way to find the crevice, to find the angle. We're trying to monitor what others are saying to the capacity of being able to measure a opinion against theirs. But this idea of Titanic and the heart of the ocean deserves a larger study. It's the absolute point of the movie, but it's not as wide open. It's not as great, we'll say, as Citizen Kane's Rosebud. It's really not. The Rosebud in Citizen Kane has so many different angles, so many different positions, so many different meanings, is up for debate forever, and it's there because it's great. This, there's too much context around. There's too many explanations. There's so many things we already know about the heart of the ocean to make an argument. There's only a few arguments you can make. So I don't know. I'm gonna go study. Going to try and do some reading. I'm going to try and compile something about the significance of the heart of the ocean. It's absolutely fascinating, and if it wasn't for a real world event, I would not have watch this movie. I would have skipped right by it. I would have tried to watch something new or something I haven't seen. But I was inspired to get into Titanic again. And even when my fiance and I came back from our vacation, we put the movie on again. So I almost like watched it back to back within 8 to 12 hours. Now, given when we returned, we were in return mode, so we weren't not 100%. But no, people, let me know what you think. AKA Pad, the film buff, signing out. Get ready for some Transformers.